Okay, now we've registered our data context service, we need to provide this connection string. And our configuration files are the app settings.json, which is read from no matter which mode we're using. And currently from our launch settings.json, we're running in development mode. And we also have an app settings file called app settings.development.json. And when we're running in development mode, then this one is read from. And only when we're running in development mode is this one read from. The app settings.json is read from if we're running in production, in development, in staging, in testing. This one is always going to be read. But this one is only used in the environment that we're running in. So this is a good place to add our development connection string. So inside here, after the logging section, I'm going to specify in quotes and then use connection strings, the pluralized version. That has to match what we saw in our data context when we added it to our program class and used the get connection string. This is shorthand for get section connection strings, so that has to be pluralized, but we do get IntelliSense with the JSON file nowadays anyway. And then we're going to specify something we don't get IntelliSense for, the name of our connection string, so to be careful with this one. And then we add a colon and then add more quotes, and then we specify a connection string suitable for the database technology we're using. Now we're going to be using SQLite, so this is incredibly simple. We just need to specify data source equals and then the name of our database file. SQLite uses a file for the database. So I'm going to say dating.db. That is all we need for a SQLite connection string. Now I know some of you are going to be tempted to just use SQL Server or Postgres or MySQL, but I would ask that you just stick with SQLite for the development phase of this training course. There's a few reasons I'm sticking with SQLite. I know this is not a production level database, and I will demonstrate how to switch this very easily to something like Postgres later on in the training course. So we can switch, because we're using Entity Framework, we can switch very easily. But there is a very good reason for wanting to stick with SQLite, and certainly when it comes to publishing our application free of charge, then it's becoming more and more difficult to find a hosting provider that will allow us to do this free of charge. If we do use SQLite, then we have more options, but please don't think that I'm going to encourage you to use a SQLite database for production. I'm really not, and I will show you how to do both later. But for development time, then SQLite is very good for developing an application. We don't need to install a database technology or database server, and it just works. It uses a file to store our database in, and that's going to be contained inside our project. So it makes our application portable. We can move it from one computer to another computer without ensuring that we've got the same database server running on that computer. And it's just a nice fit for what we're doing right now. So now we have our connection string in place, we need a way to create a new migration, which effectively Entity Framework is going to take a look at our code inside the data context. It's going to see that we've got a DB set for our users. So it's going to know it needs to create a table, and then based on the properties inside that app user class, it will need to create columns based on what we've used inside there. And the tool that we're going to use is an Entity Framework tool. It's not something that comes with the .NET CLI. So I'm just going to open up the terminal, and we've got this notification again, because hot reload only works for a very small set of circumstances. So I'm just going to stop the application anyway at this point. I would recommend you do stop the application before you run any Entity Framework specific commands. And then we're going to take a look at the tool that we need to create an Entity Framework migration. So we'll use the CLI again, and we're just going to run .NET tool list, and we're going to use a global tool for this. So just to see what you currently have installed, just run .NET tool list -g, and this will tell you what global .NET tools you have available. Now I've got one for .NET EF that's on version 8.0.1, but I want to demonstrate how to install this tool in the first place. So we're just going to go to the browser, and I'm going to go to NuGet.org. As the commands to install these tools, it doesn't hurt just to get the exact syntax that we need in this case. And I'm going to search for .NET EF inside NuGet. And this is the one that we're looking for, .NET EF. So I'm just going to click on this one. And then this is the syntax to install it to our .NET CLI globally and have it available for everything. Now there are different versions available. We do not want the preview version. Like anything else with Entity Framework, we want to install the same version of the major framework version that we are using. So in my case it's .NET 8. And if we take a look at the different versions available inside here and select versions, then just click on the one that matches the runtime that you are using. And this is the command that we'll go ahead and use to install it. So I'm just going to copy this into my clipboard, head back to VS Code, and just paste in that command to go ahead and install this version globally so that the .NET CLI has access to this. And they've improved this command lately, because previously if you already had this installed, then it wouldn't automatically update you to the latest version, it would just fail. So that's an improvement. Now we can just use this single command to make sure we've either got the latest version or we install it globally from scratch. So once you have this installed, what you should be able to do is run the command .NET -ef. And when you do this, this will bring up the help guide for Entity Framework, command line tools. And we have 3 different commands we can use. We can use database related commands, DB context related commands, or commands related to our migrations. And our concern is with migrations at this point. So if I write .NET EF migrations -h, then we'll get some help related to what we can do with migrations. So we can say that we want to add a migration, we can list our existing migrations or remove a migration. And if we wanted to give our database administrators a script to use to create a migration or to create a database and its corresponding tables, then we could just create a script that they can run directly against a database server. Our concerns at the moment are going to be to add a new migration. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to say .NET EF migrations at, and we'll give the migration a name. I'm going to choose initial create. And then we can specify an output directory of where we want these migration classes to be located. So I'm going to say -o and then data /migrations. And if we don't specify an output directory, it'll still create our migrations, but it'll just create the migrations folder in the root of our project. And I'd prefer to keep this in the data folder. So with that command in place, I'll press return, and then it will try and build our application. And if we build successfully, it should create the migration based on the code that we have in our project. And that's felt slower than it normally would take, but anyway, it has succeeded. So let's go and take a look at what it did create. And inside our data folder, we've now got a new folder called migrations. And we have 3 files in here. We've got a data context model snapshot, and we've got a initial create.designer. We're not really interested in those. These are just auto-generated code that will help us go back to a particular migration if we wanted to update our database to an earlier version of our migrations. The one that we're interested in is this one, the initial create.cs, as this will tell us what our class is going to do, or what our migration class is going to do. So we inherit from migration, and then we've got 2 methods inside here, an up method and a down method. And on the way up, it's going to create a table called users, which matches what we have in our DB context file. And then we've got 2 columns, the ID column and the username column. Now the integer, or the ID column, because it's an integer and because of conventions, that's going to use a SQLite auto increment. So each time we add a new record, it generates the next number up, and it's also going to use the ID as the primary key for that table. And because of how we created the entity, neither of these 2 columns are nullable. That means we cannot create a user in our database without an ID or a username. And on the way down, then we simply drop the table. If we remove the migration and update our database, then it simply removes the users table. So now we've got a migration. Next we'll take a look at how we can generate and create a new database.